in the global economy. And it's not easy being in their shoes because as their teams look to them for direction, they have to grapple with many questions for which they might not have an answer, especially in these unprecedented times.
Of course, change is par for the course. And prior to COVID-19, though, leaders were already having to deal with the disruption from new technologies like AI, the Internet of Things, cloud computing, robotics, so on, But what can we do then now to cope in these disruptive times? What qualities will leaders need and how can these be developed? Joining us to discuss this is Professor Sattar Bawany. He is CEO of a Disruptive Leadership Institute and the Center for Executive Education. He's also the author of Leadership in Disruptive Times, which examines the fundamental qualities of disruptive leadership that would distinguish successful leaders as they guide their organizations through the disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the digital transformation at the workplace. Professor Bawany, thank you for joining us this Monday. Trust you have been keeping well.
Thank you, Stanley, William. Thank you for having me once again in this program. Yes, it's a lovely National Day holiday, and we had a great National Day celebration yesterday. And
awesome.
Looking forward to this interesting discussion with both of you.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting indeed. Thank you for your time. Now, leaders have had to deal with changes brought about by the fourth industrial revolution, which is characterized by a range of new technologies. We mentioned a few of them earlier on, like AI and IoT. Now that we have the added problem of COVID-19, what sort of new challenges lie before leaders, business leaders, and how should they respond?
Well, you see, the interesting thing is before COVID-19 arrives, the many leaders, many organization has viewed digital transformation as a nice to have. It'd be great. It take their time to transform the organization by embarking on digital transformation. But COVID-19, as you know, because of the social distancing, the need to go from home, the use of video conferencing and so forth has now pushed this digital transformation right up front. So it's not about nice to have anymore. It's not about taking 2 to 3 years to implement your digital transformation strategy. It's about in a matter of weeks and days, that we need to put in place very quickly to ensure that the organization will survive in the post-COVID era. And the time is running out. A lot of organization is not going to survive. A lot of organization is going to be displaced. And this is the reality, especially among the SME. And I'm very concerned about this, how it's going to impact SME in a very large way in terms of the ability to thrive, ability to be able to reinvent their business model. In our research at the Disruptive Leadership Institute, the findings upon which I published in the book, and we are looking at a great number of SME worldwide. This isn't about Singapore alone, but worldwide are going to be displaced. And it's very, very worrying. And in Singapore, we estimated about 70 to 80% from our research they're going to be impacted.
Yeah,
and the
but
number
why are SMEs more vulnerable though?
Yeah, because two things. One is the business model, the way they operate. If you look at SME, there are two large groups. One is the SME, the larger SME, which have about more than 50 to 100, 200 staff with a turnover, between 10 to 100 million, and those are much larger SME. But I'm more concerned about the micro SME. Now, the micro SME are defined as those with a turnover of less than $1 million Singapore and with a employee size of less than 10. This is a group that you can expect to be greatly impacted because they are not sustainable. Even before COVID-19 arrived, they do not have a sustainable business model. And these are the organizations that are going to perish. And they already start, you can see, once the job support scheme, the GSS ends in a couple of months. And you can see the number of companies that are going to fall out, they're micro SME. And the more worrying thing is, Stanley William, is that the MOM, as I understand, the statute requires only those organizations of 10 and above have to report to MOM in event they have to retrench or let go staff. But many of the micro SME has less than 10, about 4 or 5, mom and pop, family-owned business. So if you look at the real number, which has been reported estimated between 80 to 100,000? I don't think so. I think the number is far much more greater. And by July next year, in about a year's time, you can expect to see about 3 to 400,000 based on our flash survey, based on our research by the Institute. We're looking at about 3 to 400,000 people going to be displaced. A huge number.
Right.
And
So in these uncertain times, regardless of whether it's a SME or an MNC, what qualities will leaders need to navigate these challenges?
Okay. So William, you're right. So first of all, let's talk about the challenges. What are the challenges of this COVID-19 and the digital transformation, the disruption by digital transformation? Number one is about the new digital-driven business model. Do they have what it takes to develop that? Number two is about rethinking their organization strategy in light of the new environment. And third is about developing innovative and customer-driven company culture that is consistent with many of these organizations that are very successful, like Microsoft, Starbucks, Netflix, and so forth. And then you look at the ability to upskill, reskill, or existing staff to meet the digital need. And lastly, the most important is the availability of digital talent, including data scientists. So there's a lot of challenges. So the question is, how do we resolve it now? As you correctly mentioned, there are some guidelines. Now, let me give you a very survival guide, very broadly. Number one, all leaders, and this is what our global researchers see, not only in Singapore, not only in ASEAN, globally, many of the leaders, both in business organization and in political leadership. Now, this is a reality. They are in denial. They are in denial. They need to recognize that this disruption is real and they need to acknowledge it quickly. They need to confront the new realities of the business. They need to be ready to transform every aspect of the business. They need to develop this compelling digital strategy. Vision. What does it mean? They need to develop a customer obsession, customer-centric, like what Starbucks is a great example of how Starbucks, how Apple is able to, how Amazon is able to do that. And they need to develop a culture of innovation, like what we've seen in Apple, what we have seen in Procter & Gamble, for example. And lastly, how do you create a people-centered business, so PPT, people over process technology? What is happening right now in many places in the world and in organization, even in Singapore, I commend the government for coming out with SME Go Digital. It's wonderful. But the fundamental is not about technology. It's about people. If you cannot change the mindset of the CEO, the business leader, the people expect, forget about the technology, the money, millions of dollars are being put by the government into, in Singapore, in Malaysia, many parts of the world, even in the US, into the technology aspect where they forget the fundamental approach is talking about the people, the leadership first. Address that first, then you can talk about the technology. So
Yeah,
that's
the question is for CEOs, who would be the one who should be given the responsibility to alert a CEO who may not, be aware that he really needs to have full change of mindset. You talk about mindset being very important, but if the CEO is oblivious to it, who should actually be the one to broach it?
Excellent question. Stanley, you and I met the last time in January. We talked about what is a leader and what is a manager. In my work as a C-suite executive coach, I always remind CEO, leadership does not rest with the title that they hold. Leadership exists in every part of the organization. Now, what do I mean by that? It could be a manager, could be an executive, could be anyone who's able to take the responsibility and the accountability to come forward and bring up and share and be able to have the courage to challenge the status quo and talk to the manager, talk to the senior leadership, CEO. And today we have this concept called reverse mentoring. A lot of organizations are not able to accept the fact that the younger people, the younger managers, executives, the Gen Y, and now soon digital native, the Gen Z, they're able to come up with ideas that could potentially help the organization. What the leaders are suffering today is what we call the knowing doing gap. Yeah, they know what to do, they read a lot, but they don't know what to do. Whereas in terms of digital technology, digital disruption, the young workforce, they are exposed, they learn, they read, and they experiment. So the experimentation, the mindset shift. So number one, it can be anyone in the organization. It can be a junior manager, it can be an executive, it can be someone in the front line who is able to have the right mindset, what I call in my book, the disruptive agility mindset or disruptive disruptive digital mindset, who's able to challenge the status quo. So you need to allow this anyone in the organization who's able to come forward to bring up this idea, and you must embrace them. And that's called reverse mentoring, and accept the ideas doesn't have to rest with the top leadership. Leadership is not about titles, Stanley. I told you, mentioned this before to you. Leadership is the ability to impact and influence everyone in your organization, your followers, everyone, to be able to get people to listen, to get people to do things that you believe is the right thing to do. And that does not rest with only the CEO, the C-suite, or the directors, or the MD, or whoever holds the title. It rests with every single individual employee who has the passion, who believes in the vision of the organization, who believe in the purpose of the organization. So in the digital disruption, digital transformation, is important to create what we call a purposeful organization with clarity on the vision, the digital vision. Where are you going?
Right, Professor, let's reintroduce you to our listeners now. We're speaking with Professor Sattar Bawany, CEO of the Disruptive Leadership Institute and the Center for Executive Education. He's also the author of Leadership in Disruptive Times. Professor, perhaps we can take our cue from the leaders of high-performance organizations, as mentioned in your book. What are the characteristics of these leaders and of these organizations? What can we learn from them?
Okay, let's talk about the, I think you mentioned organization. Let's talk about organization first. Right? So what does a high performance digital organization looks like? Number one, as I mentioned, they must be able to have a digital vision of what the new organization looks like, what the digital organization looks like. Second, you must have the right disruptive digital leaders in place. Yeah? Three, a culture of obsession with customers or customer centricity. Fourth, you must ensure there's a pipeline of digital talent and skills readily available to be deployed anywhere in the organization. And number five, you need to create a digital-driven culture that focuses on customer. Everything you do, every single department, everyone has one role. That is to be able to be obsessive about the customer and make sure that data is being shared. Remove the silo mentality. It's about truly collaborative to serve the customer. So, and to do that, you need to have what we call the digital driven leadership competency. And that's where the leaders comes in. Number one, you need to be able to have what we call an innovative mindset. What I call the disruptive mentality. So you must have, number one, disruptive mentality. The way you must demonstrate what we call cognitive readiness, critical thinking. This is sorely lacking, Stanley, William, right now, globally. Why are we not able to solve the problem of the pandemic? Why are we not able to come out with viable strategies? We are talking about the playbook. I've been hearing this worldwide, talking to a lot of my clients. Oh, we have done this before. You know, we have faced SARS in Hong Kong. They told me that, oh, we have faced the Asian financial crisis in Malaysia. They told me, you know, they told, oh, we have faced the September 11 in US. I said, rubbish. What get you here will not get you there, is what Marshall Goldsmith always says. And you know, the guy, the number one thought leader in leadership who endorsed my book. And what is important that we cannot rely on the past to be able to develop strategy or future. So we need to have a mental agility, okay? And not only critical thinking. Please, it's what we call cognitive readiness, a suite of competency, including critical thinking, emotional, social intelligence, resilience, adaptability, empathy, social skills, visionary, entrepreneurs. The whole suite of this competency is called the disruptive digital leader competency, as defined in my book. And where do we get this from? We studied organizations like Microsoft, Satya Nadella, the CEO. We studied Netflix. We studied Starbucks. We studied DBS Bank, Piyush Gupta, our Singapore-owned DBS Bank. In the book, there's a whole chapter about DBS Bank, how they transform, and how Piyush is a phenomenal, a great success. And not only him, of course, his group of team of people that he bring the talent that he brought in to be able to transform. Yeah. So there are a lot of skills, competency required, which is lacking in organization today.
Professor,
both government and private sector.
Yeah, a lot of more information can be found in the book that you've written titled Leadership in Disruptive Times. But if there's one all-important point and advice that you'd like to convey to business leaders right now, very quickly, what would that one key point be?
Yeah, it would be, you need to acknowledge and accept that we do not know everything. We the importance of self-awareness, acknowledge that we do not have all the answers. There is no one single person has the answer to everything. We need to be able to shift our mindset. We need to be able to develop this agility to open up and accept that maybe we learn from others. And that applies to political leadership, applies to business leadership. And I'm concerned also looking at what's happening in our country, in Singapore, about the 4G leadership, and we need to embrace and be inclusive with the private sector.
All right.
And let me give you an example. You asked me one example. Yesterday, there was an article by a former MP, Inderjit Singh, who is the former MP, PAP MP, who retired in 2015.
Sorry, Professor. I really
Yeah.
don't think we are able to accommodate time because we are going to bring up the news next. So, Professor,
Okay.
we'll chat with you another day. Professor Sattar Bawany is the CEO of Disruptive Leadership Institute, and I'm being disruptive here with our conversation,
Yeah.
and Center for Executive
Thank you.
Education as well. He's the author behind Leadership in Disruptive Times, available at businessexpertpress.com and amazon.com.
Thank you very much. Yeah.